Welcome to Harlem's Automated Tours Museum. I would just like to thank you on behalf of your interest in joining us to explore the past and look upon the great Harlem Renaissance. Let's look at the start of this all, the Great Migration. This movement migrated African Americans towards the north from the south, seeking new opportunities and escaping segregation. The city of Harlem, something we'll look more in depth later, became a hub for these opportunities. Before we continue, let's take a look at one important event that happened during this time, the Red Summer of 1919. Although it took place in many different cities, we'll be focusing on what happened in Chicago, Illinois during this time. On July 27, 1919, Eugene Williams, a black teenager, would be drowned after white people threw stones at him for crossing a racial boundary. His death sparked tensions and eventually fighting broke out. This led to many incidents like this where white people would stone African Americans during riots. How intense.
Moving on ahead, we'll skip a bit to meet our first important figure, Fletcher Henderson. Grew up in a family of musical geniuses, so it would only be natural he'd become one. Despite struggling with discrimination and financial problems, he would overcome these trials by doing what he loves and becoming famous because of it. Some of his famous works include Sugar Foot Stamp in 1925, transitioning from jazz to big band swing, Clarinet Marmalade in 1918, and influencing big band jazz arrangements, and wrapping it up in 1934, showcasing the beauty of the Renaissance music scene. Moving on, let's look at Harlem itself. Also, feel free to pause at any moment of this tour. It'll only continue as you do. That exhibit you just walked through was a representation of Harlem during its Renaissance. Harlem was this New York neighborhood where African Americans of any status could go to be free, away from any horrible past. Nowadays, it continues to be a center of African American culture, with places like the National Black Theater and the restaurants preserving their history. Although the population is still predominated by African Americans, it was nothing compared to its peak in 1950. Where 98% of the population was African American. Continuing to preserve the culture of Harlem is important to its history by practicing inclusivity and openness. Is only there to benefit the city. Both must be forgotten.
Next, we'll run through some important figures during this time. Zora Neale Hurston was an influential writer during this time. Despite facing problems of sexism and poverty, she would eventually grow to become a famous writer and create many memorial pieces. One of her most popular works was Identified, Their Eyes Were Watching of God, showcasing Black womanhood, culture, and perseverance. Another work would have been Rules of Men. Zora Neale document several cultural heritage and storytelling through celebrating oral traditions. The final work we have here today is the book Jonas Guard Vine, highlighting Black spirituality, moral dimensions, and Southern culture. Now let's look at the beautiful artists of this time.
Aaron Douglas would become a famous painter and represent so many of Harlem's core ideals. However, he grew up lacking money and wouldn't be able to afford university, forcing him to work in discriminatory and dirty settings. Inspired by his mother, he turned to art and found success in pursuing this career. His first piece, The Negro in an African Setting, would celebrate Black culture, reject racial stereotypes, and reaffirm African American pride and dignity in the middle of never-ending racism. The Judgment Day is just filled with the emotions of African Americans during this time. And finally, there's Into Bondage, a seemingly grim image of enslaved Africans, but would hold substantial messaging towards strength and optimism.
Our final figure today is Paul Robeson. Growing up in a formerly enslaved household, he had a surprisingly good childhood, but would face racism in the office when he got older, inspiring him to become an actor to speak out on these injustices. One thing he was known for was the musical Old Man River, symbolizing the struggle and endurance of African Americans and that African Americans could lead in shows. He's also famous for another river film Sanders of the River, where racial stereotypes, leading roles, and independent black cinema were all challenged. Finally, there's The Emperor Jones, where Paul would play exceptionally well and pave the way for future opportunities for people of all colors. You'll be seeing final pieces and artifacts as you leave, but we'd like to thank you for your stay. On behalf of Group 4, please do and come again.